Sure. Well, my name is Holly Longstaff, and I am a service provider. So I am currently working at the Provincial Health Services Authority. I'm the Director of Privacy and Access, PHSA Research and New Initiatives, which is a very long title, just to say that I'm the Research Privacy Director. So I support researchers all across our health authority, which includes BC Cancer, Women's, Children's, BC CDC, all of them. And my background, my training is in ethics. So that's my PhD postdoc work and all my professional work. But right now in this job, my main focus is on the ethics of privacy. And I wear a couple other hats too. I'm an adjunct prof at the Faculty of Health Science at SFU, Simon Fraser University in BC. And also I'm an ethics consultant. So I've had my own ethics consultant firm called Engage Associates since I was a PhD candidate. That's me.
That's great. That's a lot. Thank you. I was wondering if maybe you can go into a bit more detail about how you oversee all those different health providers and systems. What does that look like from a data management perspective?
Well, I can tell you that my role was created at the PHSA because, and this is published, so this is not me telling tales, a bunch of researchers got together to talk about how impossible it was to share data and get through all of the different compliance mechanisms at our health authority. And it's not unique to our health authority. This is a problem across Canada. And so they did a research project about it. Of course they did, and brought the results to my boss and said, please do something about this. So they created a role, my role. It's basically a navigator role. And because I come from a consulting background, I think that's probably why my boss wanted me to do it. I'm supposed to be fixing things, leaving things better than they were when I started. And I just basically support them in whatever way they need support. So sometimes, it means being on grants with them so that the funders know that the privacy will be done and they can actually do what they're saying that they're claiming that they want to do. Other times we'll sit down and have long ethics of privacy conversations. It might be me creating templates for them so that my belief is trying to bake in as much privacy, security, and even ethics as you can into good processes, procedures, templates, so that what's left over is the really hard stuff. And that's where you need a multidisciplinary team to help you. So me and my other service colleagues at the Health Authority get together and support these researchers. So it's whatever they need, I do. And if I can't do it, I will find someone else to help them.
That's great. That's very interesting. So can you tell us a bit about, I guess, how that's going and what's new or surprising in the work that you're doing now, especially some of the, more recent challenges that you've been facing? What's new with this area?
An easier question is what isn't new? I mean, I could use a little boring actually for the next few months if just nothing happened. That would be great. Status quo. I think probably one of the most exciting thing that's happening right now for me, my own personal research, I work with some really great researchers in ethics and bioethics around deliberative democracy research and involving publics in a meaningful way in public policy decisions and stuff like that with lots of different PIs. And that used to be kind of a cool thing that some people did and some researchers were forced to do, engage with publics, but now it is the norm. I think that people get it. They get the value of engaging with patients throughout the entire life cycle of their research project where meaningful, because we don't want to ask patients to do things that, it should be a scientist doing it or whatever. But I've been involved with a lot of big national studies that even involve patients in the grant writing stage or picking research partners right through to how they do the work and knowledge translation. And I think that they do it because it's just, the benefit is just so clear, and that's really exciting. And I think patients like it, and I think researchers like it, and so I think that's kind of great. It's the norm now, and it wasn't a few years ago.
So how has consent factored into that? Like, how has consent had to change in order to have this information being gathered and to include, the patients in that process? What's that?
Well, I think, it's an excellent question, and I think that the bioethics world where I come from has long since called for a movement towards consent to good governance. It's not individualistic notions of consent. So consent kind of started in the clinic where you go to your physician and they have this, I'm going to do these kinds of things. Is that okay? Tell you the risks and benefits and you agree. That really doesn't work with big data, with big biobanks and stuff like that. It's more of consenting to a kind of a model of good governance, which has to be very well thought out. And then the uses of those data and those biospecimens or whatever are governed properly, and maybe patients are involved. They should be involved in those kinds of decisions, but it's not every single little use of what you do, because a lot of it is hypothesis generating and stuff like that. So it's a very different model, but also it's very important to acknowledge and accept that we cannot do everything with consent. It's actually unethical, because if you depend on consent, we cannot get whole populations to participate in research. And that's absolutely essential if we're going to move research forward. And surveillance is a great example of that. During the pandemic, they're not using consent, they're grabbing everybody's data for the betterment of everybody. But that has to be carefully regulated and governed to make sure that it's appropriate and the public good is always what you're marching towards and whatnot. Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's very interesting. And thank you for explaining that distinction. I think that's really important for people to understand. So, and I know that you're the chair of our HostSeek, CGEn's leading this project for HostSeek. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and your role in that work?
Oh, HostSeek, I love HostSeek. It is an incredible example of what is possible when everybody works hard together. Like, it really got put up in lightning speed. It's led by some incredible people. I'm like a little tiny bug in the whole system. Like, there's just tons of people involved in it, but everybody is working together with the most precious data that there is like these whole genome sequence, right? And yet we can do really exciting things with it. Patients have been involved throughout the whole process. We're already reviewing and approving studies. So we have a really great multidisciplinary team on our DACO, our Data Access Committee. I am the chair. We have an incredible patient involved, Larry. I'll call him out, Larry. He's wonderful. He helps to make sure that all the lay summaries of these studies are understandable to people. And he also has incredible observations. We have also great scientists involved, of course. And we're able to review these in a way that is really efficient and high quality, and I think show what is possible. We can do things, review these things in a few days and still have a very high quality and be respectful to our clients and whatnot. So I think CancoGen as a project is an example of what is possible when everybody works together and something is properly funded.
That's great. Maybe you can talk a bit more about the data sharing side of that work. So once that information is gathered, what happens with sharing that data and what's important for people in this field to be aware of in terms of data sharing?
Well, I think one thing that's really important for people to be aware of with data sharing is that there's all sorts of mythology out there around privacy and ethics. A lot of stuff is blamed on privacy and ethics and legal and all these kinds of stuff. And I would say, do not drink the Kool-Aid. Don't do it. There's so much flexibility and permissibility in Canada. Yes, there are different privacy laws regulated by jurisdiction, as opposed to our ethics guidance, which is our ethics policy is national. But even despite the fact that there is different jurisdictions that we have to pay attention to, there's a lot more similarities than there's differences. And there are a couple of jurisdictions that have some issues that are important for their populations, and they're a little bit different than others. That's okay. We can cope with that. So I think that we put up these barriers and privacy and ethics and these kinds of things that are imaginary as a way of not doing the hard work that we need to do, because once you accept that these things are all possible, and yes, of course we can share these data, that we have consent from these people, and you can even do it without consent in certain circumstances. Once you kind of get over that, then you have to do the hard work of what do those governance mechanisms look like that to support it? How do you set up a data access committee that's properly represented with people from across the country, and who needs to be on there, and how do you engage patients? And then you have your own, there's another group that makes sure that all the data is provided to people in a safe manner. That's hard work. That's a lot harder than just saying no. But saying no, and what I say all the time is, inaction is not value neutral. there's consequences to saying no, right? I think sometimes we think in privacy and ethics that if we say no, nothing bad will happen. Oh gosh, these data are so precious and they're so sensitive. If we just say no, nothing bad will happen. Well, of course, there's consequences. There's consequences if you do this, consequences if you do that, consequences doing nothing. So yeah, I think we have to just roll up sleeves, all work together and figure out that hard work. And we can, because we're doing it right now with CancoGen.
That's really great, and it's exciting to hear that there are groups that are, pushing against the risk aversion and things like that in order to have a greater good, which I think is really important. So, I mean, with CancoGen, we are seeing that in real time. Is there any other examples maybe that you could share of where there has been the impact because data has been shared in a responsible, ethical way, but it has led to, real life improvement?
There are so many big, exciting projects happening right now. Some of them are in very early stages, earlier than others. Other ones that come to mind are the Marathon of Hope. That's the Terry Bach Research Institute. That one is super exciting, basically creating like a virtual cancer center. There's the Silent Genome Project, incredibly exciting, trying to close this genomic divide together with their Indigenous partners. That one is making incredible progress and is very, very exciting. And then, the work of Health Data Research Network Canada, HDRNet Canada, is a national data platform that's trying to share administrative data from across Canada in a way that was never permitted before. And I'm part of the privacy group that's led by our fearless leader, Donna, on the privacy group. And one of the first steps we took is, look, we can at least agree that we can share these administrative data with consent, right? So we came up with a consent template. Everybody worked together on that, all of our different subgroups. It's now available, and that's going to be essential for these genetics and genomics studies to be able to also engage with these and share these administrative data. So to me, I see all of these big projects all kind of coming together and working together and dovetailing and all benefiting from each other. So, if you're asking me like what's exciting right now in genetics and genomics, I would say like everything. And if you want me to talk about it for like 2 weeks, I could do that. And all of my researchers that are doing genetics and genomics studies are doing these incredible things and also benefiting from some of these more national and international initiatives. It's exciting, but we need to continue to support it, and it needs to continue to get funding for it to get off the ground, because it's just kind of early days.
That's great, thank you. So I guess you've already shared kind of what is exciting, but why genomics do you think is so exciting right now, and why is it so important to invest in genomics specifically in Canada?
It's all about equity. To me, it is all about equity, and inclusivity. We have a real problem in research, and especially in genetics and genomics, where it serves a small kind of fraction of the population and not everybody. I mean, that's what Silent Genome is all about, is the genomic divide, right? And when you don't participate in research, you don't benefit. You don't benefit, and people like you in the future don't benefit. So we have to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate in research. Everyone has an opportunity to benefit. But that means changing everything about how we do our work, right? It changes how we think about consent, changes how we think about waivers of consent. We need to do more waivers of consent. We need to do more population-wide studies. Which should change how we think about recruitment. Everything from tip to tail has to change to make sure that everyone can benefit. So that's something that is an exciting opportunity with some of these big national genetics and genomics projects, but it's also a big mountain to climb, because they're not doing so great right now, but they know that, and they have to do the work of being more inclusive. And I think we could absolutely do it. But again, we all have to work together to do all of our work differently, which is exciting, but scary.
It is exciting. And so how long do you think it will take before we do reach a point where things are more consolidated and secure, and there is inclusivity in the work that's being done across Canada?
Well, I mean, one of the things I worry about with the pandemic is that I worry about the spotlight on data fading and the spotlight on research fading. Because right now there's so much attention on research and data sharing, and there's tons, and I'm sorry, it needs money and it needs resources. That's the facts of the matter. and it's getting it. And so it's getting all the support, and everybody's coming together to work together, and that's exciting. But the pandemic will fade and the spotlight will fade. And if you have cancer, that's an emergency. If you have a child with a rare disease, that is an emergency. All these different types of research deserve the same kind of enthusiasm and support that our studies do right now during the pandemic. So I worry a little bit about that. So we have to really do this work, and I don't think it'll take forever. Well, it will if we don't come together and continue to work hard. But if we come together and continue to work hard, and we continue to get funding for these folks to do this work, we can close that divide. We can do it together with our patient partners, who are absolutely essential to closing the gap. Yeah.
So is that something that's maybe being thought about in these current COVID projects like CancoGen? Like, how is what the experience was and the learnings, how are they going to be translated into other national programs in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, all the lessons that are being learned right now in CancoGen and all the other studies that I mentioned apply broadly. There's of course specific things to these projects. They're all special and unique, and they fill up a particular gap in knowledge and stuff like that. But how do you set up a big platform that is safe and secure? This idea that, you know, you either have privacy or you have data sharing is nonsense. You can have incredible innovation and data sharing and still preserve privacy and do good and ethical work. You can have it all. You can have it all. And I think these projects show how to do that. And you can take the lessons learned and apply it broadly. And I hope that we will. I hope that we won't just make it about COVID or whatever, that we're going to continue and broaden these lessons. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. So what advice would you maybe give to genomics researchers that are either in these projects now or doing their own projects? How do they, you know, what processes do they need to get more involved with in order to ensure that the data can be shared and is going to help to inform other work in the future?
I think just they have to be really strong in their messaging that how important this is, the successes that they've had to date, what can happen in the future. But also the message to me is we have to start with a different conceptual framework and different messaging, and that is it is unethical not to share data. It is unethical not to include everybody in research. That's where we start. I feel as though years ago we started with it's kind of unethical to do this data sharing, but maybe we can find a way to do it that is. No, it's unethical not to learn from our data and not to share it and not to make sure that we're always working towards the public good and everybody in the public, not just a narrow public. And I think that genetics and genomics researchers really need to be strong in their messaging and talk about the great work that they're doing and how it's benefiting people. And also get your patient partners out there and talk about how you're working together. Don't assume that everybody understands that and understands the work you do and the partnerships you're creating. I would say be really vocal and don't be afraid to talk to publics and do events and all that kind of stuff. I would strongly encourage them to do that.
That's great. And then I guess from an infrastructure standpoint, because there's also there's, you know, the perception of it, but then there's the infrastructure and the capabilities. And you mentioned that there needs to be investments in this, but can you talk a little bit more about maybe the infrastructure of data and sharing data? What is needed? And maybe you can talk about how CGEn maybe plays a role in some of that.
CGEn's the backbone. CGEn is the backbone. It's the essential ingredient. I mean, it's the thing that's going to carry this all forward. It needs to be funded. And I think it shows what can happen if you have something central that is well funded and everybody's supported. Look how we can all benefit from it. Don't be afraid of sharing resources. I think that researchers have been burnt really badly in the past by being told, oh, we're going to consolidate this, or we're going to centralize this, and you're all going to use this. And then they go to it and it's a worse resource. It's not a good tool. And so, well, now I've given up, you know, my freedom and my innovation to pour my funding into this thing that doesn't really work very well. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we have to honor the experiences of researchers in the past that have had those kinds of questions and really talk honestly about it. We have to make sure that researchers can express these concerns and say, like, you know, if we all support this, then how am I going to make sure that I'm able to do this and that and whatever? And we have to really be honest about these conversations. But I don't really see how we can move forward if we don't support things like CGEn and really just pour all the resources that it needs in there for it to be nimble and great and secure and all and well-resourced and supported.
Well, that's great. And that's really good to hear. What do you think makes Siegen different than maybe those bad experiences in the past that has, helped to elevate people's work as opposed to diminish it by bringing everyone together?
I think that you've engaged all the right folks. I think that it's well-resourced. I think there's maybe a shift in thinking about how important these things are and that it really does need some money and it really does need resources. You can't build up some rink-a-dink thing and expect it to work. It has to be properly resourced. And also, these things sound expensive at the beginning, and they are, but they save money in the long term. And it's hard for people to think that way, especially when you're asking these funders to give out dollars that we're talking, saving so much money in the future, but it will. I mean, if you bake in some of the ethics, a lot of the privacy, security, and all that stuff into great platforms, and that is reducing and eliminating a ton of work that won't need to be done in the future. And also the benefits that can come from it. I know it's hard to articulate and account for, but that also, is something that has to be considered. The resources we put into this now are going to translate into benefits, financial and all sorts of other benefits later on. I can imagine as a funder, it's very difficult to make those decisions of things that are going to pay off so long in the future. But I believe that that's true. And I believe in baking in the compliance is something that something that's easy for folks to understand and see how you can, save a lot of resources in the short term.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Was there anything else? I mean, you can really feel your excitement about all this work. And it's really inspiring to hear about. So is there anything else that you wanted to share? Anything that's exciting for you about genomics or your work now and also in the future from now? Like you seem very optimistic and excited. So is there anything else that you just wanted to share while we have you?
I am optimistic. I am obviously really excited. I work with some of the best researchers in the world. I have like the best job ever. Not many people get to work in their PhD area, so I'm very, very lucky. But part of me does worry that we're at a moment now, which feels a bit like stretching an elastic, where it's either gonna bang out and we're just gonna do incredible, amazing things. We're on that road, or it is gonna snap back and snap us in the face. I'm worried. Is it going to go this way? Is it going to go this way? And I think the way to be ensure that it goes this way, because we're just at the beginning. There's so much more that we need to be able to cope with, and artificial intelligence, all sorts of other things that we want to be doing, and not just sharing nationally and internationally. We need to do more. But I think we just need to all keep talking about how this is going to benefit the public and continue to engage the public, because if we don't have social license to do this and we're not really reflecting the public's values, then what are we doing? So I think we need to get out there, engage with people, bring them into the conversation, bring them into our governance mechanisms, and make sure that we're all on the same page together. And then I think we'll go that way instead of snapping back.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing all this. And our time has flown by, but I just wanted to thank you for speaking with everyone who's watching this video and keeping along with the news and all the different important work that's being done by you and all the researchers that you're working with. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.